Hey, good to be here.
Nice to have you here. So Ofer, for those of you who don't know, is co-founder of the Israel Bitcoin Association. So it goes all the way back to 2013, the old days, and is an investor in over 20 blockchain startups and ICOs. And we were talking about putting together a whole panel on Israel, and there's a lot of folks that are in Israel right now that are working hard away. There's some who are in Asia right now. There's a very hardworking group of Israeli entrepreneurs all over the world. And so I thought you could be their sort of spokesperson here, and we'll try to put a larger panel together in CoinAgenda Global in October. But tell me a little bit about, obviously Israel has been world famous in the startup community, for outperforming Silicon Valley in terms of just like overall returns and the amount of startups per capita, the number of NASDAQ IPOs that have gone out compared to the U.S. and again per capita. Just really history of really incredible entrepreneurship. So it's no surprise that there have been quite a few great startups to come out of Israel on the ICO side, including one we're both very familiar with, which is Bancor, which actually debuted at CoinAgenda in Puerto Rico last February of 2017, and many people say that their ICO kind of kicked off the new wave of high-performing mega ICOs. So tell us a little bit about sort of how you first got involved with crypto in Israel and how the community has evolved since 2013.
All right. So I first heard about Bitcoin, I think it was January 2013, and for me it really connected strongly because it seemed to be a very good alternative to what we all had in mind. We had those going to Wall Street demonstrations a few years before that. So we all understood that there was something that can be improved in the system, right?
Occupy Wall Street.
Occupy Wall Street. That's the right, exactly. So across the world, you saw these protesters, and people understood that things could be better. And Bitcoin was like a very practical way of improving it, right? Because it's an alternative. So it really caught my attention, and I decided to buy a bunch of Bitcoins back then, and co-founded the Israeli Bitcoin Association with a few early adopters in 2013. Since then, the community has grown exponentially. Now I don't even know how many we have on our different channels of the Israeli Bitcoin Association. We're working very closely with the regulators. There have been a few very positive developments in terms of regulation in Israel. So Israel is joining the arms race in terms of international regulation, even though it's a challenge, right? Competing with fast-moving places like Malta and Gibraltar and all these. But we're getting there, and we've seen up and downs, I'd say. So it was up until 2016 was still the early adopters and people who are like fundamentally, they believe in the core values of Bitcoin and of the crypto community, and they want to change the world and had those great ideas.
Then be like Lazuz.
Exactly. So, Lazuz is a great example.
I remember with Lazuz, we worked with them at Transform, and I remember that was the first time I had somebody take my contract and send it back and say, we are a decentralized autonomous organization, so we can't sign on behalf of the users because we simply reflect the wishes of the users, but we we finally ended up having everybody in the company sign on behalf of the users. It was very lofty in terms of they paid up front, so it didn't matter, but it was just very it was the mindset was there. Yes,
definitely. So those kind of people, and they're now doing or some of them, Matan is doing DAO Stack now, which also has that mindset. But 2017 we saw new blood come in for the better and for the worse. We saw more interest from academia. and also more interest from the regulators, which now in 2018 we are starting to stabilize the regulation and all that. So that's a good part. But we also saw people from the old binary option industry, which was outlawed in Israel. A lot of scams. I don't want to paint the whole industry in the same brush, obviously, but there were a lot of scams coming out from that industry, and unfortunately, Israelis played a big part of that. Not proud of that at all, but you got to say that. And those same people, the first time I encountered one of those was when they tried to pitch me their project. So you have this guy, well dressed, and he speaks like highly, and he knows his pitch, right? And he tells me all about his coin and how magnificent it's going to be, and it's gonna, people gonna love it and buy it, and etc. And I'm trying to get to the fundamentals, and he keeps avoiding. I'm saying, so okay, you're great at marketing, everything super. I want to invest. What's your product? What am I buying? At the end, it turns out that he has a team in Manila or something that are just telemarketing, and they're calling these households around the world and telling them that the coin is like Bitcoin, and it's now 50% cheaper, and tomorrow it's going to be expensive, so you got to buy it now, like salespeople. And those type of people came in 2017, and that's a very negative thing for the industry, right? Because for the regulators, they were saying, they were kind of painting blockchain and crypto with the same brush that they were painting the binary options industry.
Yeah, and I think you have to really look, and I think the industry itself, both in Israel and Malta and the United States and elsewhere, has to realize that if we don't regulate ourselves, the governments are going to be heavier handed as a default, because they're going to have a history of scams to say this person got hurt, this person got hurt. I mean, none of us want the one coins of the world out there.
Yeah, definitely.
And as an investor doing your own due diligence, because at the end of the day, we're responsible for the success or failure of our own investments, is, like you said, where is your token? Where's your programming team? Is it anything other than just a bunch of people in Manila saying get rich quick?
Yep.
I mean, this is very similar to the .com days when I literally had people come into my office and, I'd say, what's your product? And they'd say, we're going public. And I go, yes, but what's your product? Our product is we're going public. We're at .com.
Yeah.
Yes, but what's your product? We don't need a product. We're going public.
Same thing. So we saw that bubble in 2017, and a lot of projects raised, unproportional amounts of money to their stage. We saw that with Bancor. I think it was a huge number, and I like
153 million.
Yeah. So a startup, and they were hardworking people, and they worked, I think, a year before the ICO or so, and even before that they had AppCoin. So they were in this industry, and they're good people. But the amount that they raised is inconceivable to, if you look at traditional funding.
Well, particularly when you look at it, and I don't know how much they cashed out when Ethereum was $40, which is what it was when they raised, versus $400, which it is today, versus $1,400 at its top. But they could conceivably have over $1 billion sitting in their coffers, depending on when they sold. Yeah. And certainly not less than 200 or so.
So now startups that have raised those amounts of money are suddenly focused not only on developing the best product that they can and finding the best product market fit, which is what you do in a normal startup. They're also focused on maintaining their funds and managing the funds and maybe reinvesting the funds, and they become a hedge fund.
Treasury management, when all of a sudden you're just sort of gifted by the market several $100 million worth of capital, you'd be irresponsible not to sort of have somebody who's a professional arbitrage trader, manager, to be able to say, here's what we need for operations, here's what's prudent to take off the table right now. Where we are at the market, you take too much off too soon, it's just like, oh, you idiot, you could have had 10 times as much. You wait too long, it's like, oh, you idiot, you have 1/10 of what you raised. Yep. I remember actually the head of a project, Block V, that went out in, I think it was November, so pretty close to the peak, was asked, how much are you going to keep in Bitcoin and Ethereum? And he said, I'm going to sell 80% for cash, immediately.
Yeah.
And everybody was shocked by that. And he said, why are you shocked? He said, if I raised a comparable amount of money from Sequoia Capital, and they said, what's the first thing you're going to do? And I said, I'm going to buy Bitcoin with 32 million of the 40 million, they would not only throw me out of the company, they'd probably call the police.
Yeah. No, exactly. When you hold Bitcoin, it's the exact same thing as deciding to get that money in US dollars and buying those Bitcoins. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the ecosystem that's evolved, because in early 2017, a number of people, had been sort of at the edges, sort of like came out all at once. And, again, I'm going back to the Puerto Rico, our first non-mainland U.S. CoinAgenda conference. It was our first CoinAgenda Caribbean. 2018 CoinAgenda Caribbean, we had 600 people there and 55 ICOs. The one that, again, was just the start of the boom was in March of 2017, and I think we had 18 companies presenting. Only 12 were ICOs, 6 were looking for venture capital funding, and of those, the 5 winners that we had, 3 of them were Israeli. So Bancor won place number 1. Eternity placed number 2, and Matchpool I think was number 4.
Okay.
So again, it seemed like this community all knew each other really well, all worked with each other, was very supportive. I mean, what's the environment like there in terms of, you look at Silicon Valley, there's camaraderie, but there's also a little bit of a, kind of knife fight for talent. I mean, how does that play out in Israel? Is it really more supportive, all ships sort of like rising tide and fight against the rest of the world, or is there a little, as things are getting tighter for talent, poaching and competition going on there?
Well, no, I don't see too much poaching. I see more the working together, kind of like a kibbutz mentality for those who are familiar with this term. So basically people working together for a common goal, which is putting Israel on the map and and being on the same level as good teams from around the world, because we know competition is tough, and we believe in what we do, and it's a small place, right? So people talk, especially in Israel, it's such a swamp, we call it, right? It's a small place, and words get around, and if you don't help one day, then people are going to start talking about you, and they're going to know that you're not you're not a team player. And one day you're doing this project, and the other day you're doing another, and yeah.
Originally, Yanni was supposed to be here. He sent the event instead of the COO, who'll be here tomorrow, because, again, everybody's trying to hop off to different conferences in different parts of the world and juggle their schedules. But we will have one of the co-founders of Eternity here tomorrow.
Eternity, okay.
Yeah,
good.
And not Matchpool, but Eternity. And I guess the question then would be, there's also on the investor side, folks like the stocks and the Pellet brothers. I worked with Daniel first when he did the GEMS token back in early 2014, and then he resurfaced with the stocks token, and so
Orbs.
So he's been really kind of incubating a whole ecosystem in Israel. And how common is that? How much incubation is happening in Israel? And where do you see the market in Israel going in terms of leadership from an entrepreneurial perspective and an investing perspective the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I'm trying to think if I understood your question. You mean who are going to be the actual players that will be doing the next projects?
Not even the who, but how do you see this expanding from sort of like its state today, where it's, I wouldn't say an also-ran, but it's like it's certainly usually when someone says where are the hot spots of blockchain. You hear Toronto, you hear Switzerland, you hear Malta, obviously for jurisdiction, and Israel's sort of like you hear more kind of fragmented, like, oh, there's the Bancor folks or this and that. I mean, is there a kind of a Tel Aviv movement happening, and where do you see this going? Will it be things like the incubator and the Karetsu that people like you and Daniel put together?
Yeah, so me and Daniel, we go back also since 2013. I first invested in projects that he did before Get Gems, and I also invested in Get Gems. And definitely, I mean, right now I'm partnering with the Israeli partner of 500 Startups, the Silicon Valley-based VC, and we're opening a VC that will be focused on long-term investments, and so we are also going to be another player in helping out startups. So I don't know if I would use the word incubating, but we are going to have a space for startups to work out for free, and just do their first steps of trial and error.
Well, to me, incubating is your team and their ideas owning most of the control and equity of the tokens that come out of it. Acceleration is where you're looking for other startups and you provide them the resources. So difference between an idea lab where it was all Bill Gross's ideas and then he built it out teams and created great companies versus Y Combinator where they're going and saying, we want to find the best companies in the world and we'll help you grow.
Yeah, so we don't see ourselves as taking a very large portion of each startups. We believe, we have a certain value to give, other than funding, obviously. And each startup needs to see what kind of values does he need from other players in the team. So we're really looking at it to be team players, with other VCs and with other players in the ecosystem, including the Pellets and people from around the world. From our network. So, the focus is really the startup itself and the startup's specific needs. So the startup needs somebody that is an expert in blockchain, but they might also need a fund that is an expert in their vertical within blockchain. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask one last question before I turn it over to the audience for their questions. And this is a theme we're going to talk a little bit more tomorrow. Today's been sort of the jurisdictional and Malta day. Tomorrow is going to be really all about digital currency funds and investing. And then, of course, the third day is going to be the presentations by the ICOs. So tomorrow, a big theme is going to be the move from... you don't get it, equity people. Tokenization's where it's at. I'm not giving up any equity. I'm just selling tokens, take it or leave it, goodbye. To now all of a sudden you're seeing even a lot of the token funds asking for equity because the markets are so down and there's instability, and they want to see if perhaps there's two bites at the same apple or just to further hedge the risk. Are you finding this trend happening in Israel as well? And it's also a way of getting traditional VCs to at least look at a token deal.
Yeah, so definitely, I think the game is changing, and it's changing to the right direction, in my opinion. Like more long-term strategic plays, not necessarily doing the ICO, just 3 months after having the conceptual idea, right? So you start off with traditional funding, you do your equity round, and then as the team grows and the product market fit is found, only then at the end you go to the retail investors when there's actual usability of your token, and you go out and spread the tokens to the world. And the VCs that invested in you and took the highest risk, they're getting they're getting as part of the deal some of the tokens. And the equity, like the way I see it in the long term, won't necessarily be worth a lot, mainly in terms of decision making. So if we want to really have your opinion heard, then that's where the equity would play. But in terms of value, the
equity could be worth a lot. Just like let's just say that somebody was investing under this model in Ethereum, and they ended up, even though Ethereum is a foundation, say Joe Lubin had already started Consensus, and you had a piece of Consensus as a for-profit, as well as a a piece of or a number of the tokens. Obviously, did fabulously well on the 30 cents Ethereum offering, but you probably would have done pretty well if you got a point or two of consensus.
Right. No, definitely. I'm not saying it as a general, right? If I would have invested in I don't know. One of the big companies out of the US, Coinbase, let's say, that would have been great, right? But in general, for projects who are genuinely decentralized, right? Let's take DAO Stack, for example, or any projects that are fundamentally they need to be decentralized and they need to have a token. Then I think the stage, the way that they would ideally go through would be an equity or equity token, you could say, and then a transition to utility token where the value sits in the utility and the usability of that, and the equity would be just for governing. But for sure, there will be like supporting startups or supporting companies like Consensus or
well, and there have also been things like, I go back to some of the earliest models where there was sort of a decentralized nonprofit that is the blockchain, and a for-profit company that then, a decentralized token is, I always like to say, I repeat this a lot as an example, is the bar of gold. And the for-profit is the gold mining stock. Yeah. So gold mining stock can outperform the price of gold, or it can do way worse because it's poorly run. Right. It's about top line and bottom line. It's only about top line growth, supply and demand for the commodity. And I think the first company to sort of have a profit and a non-profit was MadeSafe. The first one to sort of successfully raise money for both of them is Factom. Factom went out and, on the venture side, they're now in their A round with Tim Draper and Austin Ventures and, I think $30 or $40 million valuation. On the other hand, you did much better if you bought the token at 5 cents and it went up to a high of $60.
Right. So that's a case where the same team does both plays, right? Yep. Both the mining company and the gold bars. Yep. So for that, I definitely agree. But you could break that apart into two plays.
Okay.
Yep.
Questions from the audience?
Anything about the Israeli ecosystem?
Gotta have questions about Israel, right? Questions? Yep, right over here. Just say who you are and where you're from.
Roger Aitken, Forbes, London. Just wondering how significant you thought it was that the Eurocrypt event was in Tel Aviv earlier this year, the first time it's been held in Israel.
Sorry, the what event?
The Eurocrypt.
Oh yeah, it was last May, was it? Yeah. Right? Yeah. So a lot of people flew in. Israel is very big in cybersecurity, right? And also cryptography. We have a few good teams from the universities working on that, so it made sense, and I was really excited, to have it in Israel, and I'm happy to see Israel becoming. In the past 10 to 15 years, Israel has really changed for the better. So even I remember, just driving on the road, it wasn't so pleasant 10 to 15 years ago. It was like I don't want to offend anybody, but like in India, right? It was crazy. And today people are much more courteous, and so we see that positive movement also within academia and the business community, and I think that's also positive. The world sees us and perceives us in that way, and more events come to Israel because of that. So yeah, I was excited to have it.
Other questions?
Yeah, in the back.
Just say where you're from.
Hey. Alex from Bicameral Ventures / Aeon. And we actually ran a meetup in Tel Aviv a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
Yeah. No, actually, my question to build on your last point was what do you see kind of the academic side of Israel moving towards on this? Is there starting to be more of a focus on either the business side or the technology side on growing out that ecosystem? And I ask because from Toronto, where I'm from, thank you for the shout out as a crypto hotspot, Michael, is that we've really seen our universities jump on it a lot, and where we're doing sort of as the business people doing the version today, we rely on our academics to sort of look at the version 3, 4, 5 down the line because they don't have a for-profit motive at all today. So there's a really good kind of vibe that we have between us and the universities. So interested in what that looks like in Israel.
Yeah, so we definitely see a lot of interest from the academia. It started as a grassroots movement, so just students who were curious about it, and they started slowly but surely asking their professors and asking their university bodies, hey, are we doing something about Bitcoin, etc. And now it's like starting to get more official, right? To have like these blockchain clubs, and you have one in Haifa, and there's one in Beersheba in the south of Israel. So it's starting to pop. And also companies, there's Kedit, a company I've invested in that Viv Zohar is from the Hebrew University, and he's working on zero-knowledge proofs on snarks. And there is Eli Ben Sasson and Uri and their team from the Technion that are doing Starks, which is also a different kinds of zero-knowledge proof, and they've just they announced Starkware. They got funded recently. So we're seeing, and we're going to see more and more academia involved, both in business and in research. And also from the business side, not only the technological people, but and researchers, but also business community, like the business schools, are jumping on it and trying to understand the different types of economies and economics that are created, and how to evaluate projects, right? What's a sustainable market cap for this or for that? So we're starting to see that, definitely. Yep, thanks.
I think we have time for one more, and then we'll be relatively back on track.
Any final questions? Any final questions on Israel? There's got to be another question, no? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I guess that's it.
I think I see a hand. Is there a hand there?
Yeah.
No, he's drinking water.
Okay.
he had a
we do have a question over here. Say where you're from.
Okay, hi, Manoj from Peak State. I just have a question. How's the investment kind of scene in Israel? Is it also you're considering investing in blockchain outside of Israel, or is there like a big kind of fund community coming up there?
Yeah. So there are a few funds that are looking at this space. There are a few that are active in the space. As I mentioned, I'm now starting a fund. I've been an angel investor for the past 5 years. Now I'm doing it more officially with more capital, and so definitely we're looking to invest outside of Israel. We understand that Israel is a good opportunity, but it's a state of 8 million people, so it's really small. So it wouldn't be logical for us to focus just on the Israeli market. There aren't enough top-tier projects to deploy money in. So we're definitely looking worldwide and to partnering with other funds, and we have people around the globe that are our LPs that are helping out with sourcing deals and helping us with due diligence. So we're definitely looking outside. I think if I would guesstimate, we will have about 20% of our fund's investments in Israel and 80% outside of Israel. That would be my guess. So yeah, definitely.
Thanks. Fantastic.